It was late summer of 1862, and the Dakota people of Minnesota were starving. Treaties signed with the U.S. government had limited their access to land and resources to a fraction of what they needed to survive. Money, food, and supplies promised in exchange for the millions of acres of land were always short, often rotten, and never what was initially agreed upon. The Dakota also faced terrible racism. One white settler historically quoted, "Let them eat grass." Hunger raged, not just for food, but for the way of life that seemed to be quickly disappearing. On August 17th, hunting parties were organized and set out to gather what food they could for the long winter ahead. A group of 4 young Dakota came upon a farmhouse near Acton Township where they were caught stealing eggs. Shots were fired, and 5 settlers lay dead. The Dakota returned and informed their leaders. A war council featuring Little Crow and Little Six was formed, and they apprehensively decided that force must now be brought. The U.S. government was currently embroiled in a war for the future of the relatively new country, as a civil war raged in the South and East. Little attention was paid to the plight of the indigenous people or any difficulty for northern settlers. The U.S.-Dakota War of 1862 was initially referred to as the Dakota Uprising or the Massacre of the Sioux, a minor inconvenience or speed bump on the road to progress and the United States' manifest destiny. In reality, the war lasted 37 days, about as long as the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s, and ended the lives of 493 people, about 100 more than died at that same Gulf War, and irreparably changed Minnesota's cultural landscape. The war's end saw over 2,000 Dakota surrender at Fort Sibley, and a trial of 392 Dakota men was to take place at the fort in Mankato, Minnesota. A military court was convened, even though the Dakota men were never provided the rights granted to other military prisoners during the current Civil War. 300-plus men were charged and tried in 42 days. Many men spoke no English, were provided no legal counsel, no translation, and did not fully understand the charges levied against them. This would be unheard of today. Carol Chomsky writes, "The trials of the Dakota were conducted unfairly in a variety of ways. The evidence was sparse, the tribunal was biased, the defendants were unrepresented in unfamiliar proceedings conducted in a foreign language. Governor Alexander Ramsey wired Washington and requested the authorization to condemn 303 men to death by hanging. President Abraham Lincoln, needing to continue to curry favor with European powers, worried about the optics of killing so many captured men at one time. They compromised and agreed to bring the death sentence to 39 men, and the great emancipator additionally promised to remove every Indian from the territory. On December 26th, the day after Christmas, in Mankato, Minnesota, 38 men were hanged. One man's rope broke, and he was rehung. 4,000 people attended the execution, and cheers rang out from the crowd when the men fell to their deaths. The men's lifeless bodies hung from the scaffold for over 30 minutes before they were cut down and buried in a shallow grave along Mankato's main street. Within hours, the bodies had been dug up by grave robbers to be sold and used as medical cadavers. It remains the largest mass execution in U.S. history.